I never imagined my life would unravel under the hum of fluorescent lights in a government complex. By day, I was known as Miri, one of the leading electrical engineers at Guinea Grid Systems, a multinational energy conglomerate operating in Malabo. I'd earned my place with sweat and sleepless nights, designing power systems capable of lighting up entire districts. I took pride in my job. My circuits didn't lie, didn't cheat, didn't manipulate. They either worked or they didn't. Unlike people. At home, I was the wife of Lieutenant Marcos Isono, a rigid and respected police officer with deep loyalties to the Ministry of Interior. We had been married for 8 years. Our relationship was more of a disciplined partnership than a love story, the kind of union built on respect, duty, and a mutual understanding that romance was a luxury we couldn't afford. We lived in a modest villa in Rebola, just outside of Malabo, with a guarded fence and a garden he insisted we keep immaculate. Appearances matter, he would say, always polishing his boots as if the soil from the earth might tarnish his sense of order. He was a good man. A serious man. But not a passionate one. It was at a state energy summit hosted at the National Palace that I first met Bessa in Gonga. The room was thick with cigar smoke and bureaucratic tension. Ministers, oil magnates, and foreign envoys debated with forced diplomacy about renewable energy strategies for the region. I was there on behalf of Guinea Grid to present a prototype power converter we had developed, an innovation that could stabilize remote grids plagued by voltage inconsistency. I delivered my presentation with my usual technical rigor, pointing at graphs, projecting images of substation schematics. The applause at the end was polite, if a little bored. As I stepped off the stage, I caught the eye of a man in a tailored navy suit, his face carved with calm authority. He approached me during the reception. "You have a gift," he said. "It's rare to find someone who makes electrons sound poetic." I laughed, surprised. "Most people just say I sound like a textbook." "Textbooks don't wear heels," he said, eyes glancing downward. I should have walked away. But I didn't. He introduced himself simply, Bessa in Gonga. Financial investigations. The name hit like a pause in music. Everyone in the country knew Bessa, a man whose presence could shut down companies, freeze assets, and ruin careers overnight. He ran the National Financial Investigation Agency, an organization more feared than revered, whispered about in the corridors of ministries. And here he was, asking for my number. Over the next few weeks, Bessa and I exchanged messages. He was always careful, always brief. He'd compliment my intelligence, ask me about current projects, casually drop hints about upcoming regulations that might affect our company. At first, I told myself it was professional. That he was just interested in collaboration. But the messages got more personal. Late at night, after Marcos was asleep, I would reread his text and feel a strange warmth in my chest. He would send lines like, "What does it feel like to control a current, Mire? To tame wild power? Or you wear silence like armor? I want to know what's underneath." I didn't answer those texts. Not at first. But I also didn't delete them. Bessa never invited me to his official residence. Too many eyes, too much protocol. Instead, he kept a private apartment on Avenida de Lopez, above a quiet bookstore that smelled of cedar and damp pages. It was there that the line between right and wrong began to blur. He poured me imported wine. I told him about my frustrations at work, about the corruption I saw creeping into procurement contracts, the quiet bribes passed under conference tables. He listened, not like a husband, not like a cop, but like someone who wanted to understand me. He kissed me that night, slow and certain. I didn't stop him. I didn't tell him to stop when his hands traced the same places that Marcos had memorized in routine. With Bessa, it felt like a rediscovery of myself, of my skin, of my mind. It was wrong. Every second of it. But it also felt alive. Afterwards, he leaned against the window, looking out at the sea, shirt unbuttoned, his voice low. I don't believe in monogamy, he said. Not in the traditional sense. Some men need multiple outlets for their current. One socket can't handle it all. I laughed, bitterly. So I'm just another connection. He turned to me. No. You're the generator. Bessa made promises. That I would be his second wife, in accordance with customary law. That I would never want for anything. That he would protect me, even from Marcos. The more time I spent with him, the more bored I became. I stopped caring about covering my tracks. I used work trips as cover, claiming I had site visits in Bata when I was with him in his apartment. But secrets have a voltage. The longer you carry them, the more they pulse. One night, as I was returning home, I found Marcos sitting in the dark, his service pistol on the coffee table. I followed you, he said. I know about him. My breath caught. I'm sorry, no. Don't apologize. Just tell me why. Was I not enough? I looked at him, this man who had always done right by me, who stood guard over our life like a soldier at a post. And I told him the truth. I stopped feeling like a woman with you. I became a routine. A checklist. Bessa made me feel dangerous. He didn't hit me. He didn't scream. He just stood, gathered his gun, and left. I didn't see him for 3 weeks. When the reckoning came, it wasn't from Marcos. It was from the state. A corruption investigation surfaced involving Guinea Grid and its subcontractors. Internal audit documents were leaked. Someone had traced transactions back to meetings I had with Bessa, dates, locations, timestamps. An anonymous report accused me of insider collaboration. I was suspended. Bessa was summoned by the Council of Ministers but never appeared. His apartment was found empty. Passport gone. Rumors said he'd fled to Madrid. I was left behind with nothing. Not my husband. Not my career. And not the man who promised to make me his second wife. It's been 2 years. I live in Bata now, teaching electrical systems at a technical school. The students don't know who I used to be. To them, I'm just Madame Mire, the woman who talks to wires and believes in second chances. Some nights, the lights flicker in the city. The current stutters, then dies. And I sit in the dark, thinking about circuits and how easy it is for something powerful to burn out when it's not grounded. Why I chose another woman's husband. People always ask the same question when they find out what I did. Why would you leave your husband for a married man? They ask it with wide eyes and hushed voices, like they're stepping around a grave. They expect guilt, maybe shame, or some dramatic story of betrayal. But the truth is quieter. It moves like water under a sealed floor, invisible until the damage is too great to hide. This story isn't about lust. It isn't about escape. It's about need, the kind that grows inside you when you're forgotten while standing right in front of someone who once swore they'd see you forever. Marcos and I had a marriage that looked good on paper. We had jobs. A home. No scandal. We paid our bills and kept our secrets. From the outside, we were the model of middle-class security in Equatorial Guinea. He wore his police uniform like a suit of armor. I wore my ambition like a mask. But no one saw what our silence looked like at night. No one heard the way we didn't speak at dinner. The way he would turn off the lights at exactly 10 p.m., without asking if I was finished working or thinking, or simply sitting there trying to remember the last time he looked at me like a woman instead of a piece of furniture in his structured little world. I don't say this to destroy his image. He wasn't cruel. He didn't cheat. He didn't hit me or shame me. He simply stopped seeing me. And I stayed. For 8 long years. Until someone else saw what he didn't. Bessa wasn't supposed to mean anything. At first, he was just another high-level man in a suit, another name whispered in government corridors, another powerful figure who carried a pen like a sword. I knew he was married. Everyone did. His wife was part of the diplomatic scene, often photographed at charity events and state galas. They had children. A big home with guards and imported marble tiles. But I was drawn to the way he spoke to me, not like a subordinate or a pretty face behind a spreadsheet, but like a person. He saw my mind first. My ideas. My frustrations. The things I thought were too heavy to share with anyone else. He didn't look through me. He listened. And when he touched me, he didn't do it out of routine. There was hunger in it. Respect. Curiosity. It had been so long since I felt like anyone wanted me, not just as a wife or an engineer, but as a living, breathing, complicated woman. Yes, I knew he was married. Yes, I knew it was wrong. But the heart doesn't obey the law. It doesn't care about rings or government registers. It listens to the parts of you that haven't been touched in years. People think love is this clean, noble thing. But love is messy. It doesn't always arrive in neat packages. Sometimes, it shows up in forbidden rooms, in the messages you read under your desk at work, in the heat of someone's hand resting on your back for 1 second too long. And the more time I spent with Bessa, the more I began to realize that what I had with Marcos wasn't a marriage. It was a contract. An agreement of loyalty without intimacy. A routine painted with duty and stripped of affection. Marcos believed that love meant security. That providing food and protection was the same thing as passion. He never asked what I dreamed of. Never asked how I felt about the nights I stayed late at the plant, reprogramming control panels just to feel something light up under my fingers. Bessa, in contrast, was fire and shadows. He made promises I should never have trusted. He told me I was the only woman who could stand beside him, who understood both power and silence. He said his first wife would never accept the kind of world he was trying to build, that she lived in appearances and formality. I was the opposite. I understood how the world really worked through sacrifice, secrecy, and grit. He said I was the kind of woman a man builds an empire with. The second wife who doesn't just sit beside him, but holds the ledgers, reviews the contracts, studies the power grid maps while he prepares legislation. And I believed him. Not because I was naive, but because I was starving. I was starving for connection, for meaning, for the feeling of being chosen. You might think I was a fool, that I gave up a steady marriage for a dangerous affair. And maybe you're right. But I didn't leave because I hated Marcos. I left because I could no longer live inside a shell where love was dead and silence was the loudest thing in the room. I didn't leave for sex. I didn't leave for money. I left because I wanted to be wanted fully, obsessively, truthfully. And Bessa gave me that, for a time. He told me he would take me as his second wife under customary Bubi law, that the state didn't need to know, only our hearts did. He told me his first wife would never leave him, but she had accepted long ago that his path would not be a monogamous one. That I would be cared for. That we could be discreet, powerful, and purposeful. It sounded like madness, but also like freedom. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. Of course, I didn't know what it would cost. I didn't know the government was watching him. I didn't know there were men in offices collecting files, printing receipts, tracing steps and phone calls. I didn't know that being close to Bessa was like standing near a life transformer, powerful, yes, but little when it blows. I didn't know I'd lose everything. My husband, my home, my job, even my reputation. I thought I was walking toward a new life. But I was walking into a fire I couldn't put out. Now, sitting here years later, I sometimes wonder if I regret it. The easy answer is yes. But the truth is more complicated. Because even though Bessa vanished and left me behind with burned bridges and broken titles, I learned something valuable in that storm. I learned that I deserved more than quiet disappointment. I learned that loving someone, even recklessly, was better than dying slowly in a loveless shell. I learned that power attracts power and it destroys anything weak. So no, I don't regret leaving a husband who couldn't see me. And I don't regret loving a man who did. Even if he loved me with lies. Because for the first time in my life, I got to feel something real. Even if it was stolen. The man who could not be caught. My name is Bessa Ngonga, and I have never feared scandal. For nearly 2 decades, I built my name in silence, buried under files no one dared to open and truths no one was brave enough to speak. I was the man who followed the money whether it passed through oil contracts, foreign banks, or the gold-plated hands of ministers who smiled on television and stole in the dark. I led the National Financial Investigation Agency, a division most feared not because of its laws, but because of me. Men feared me not for what I said, but what I never needed to say. My presence alone could empty rooms. My voice, measured and slow, was more lethal than any gun. But for all the power I wielded, for all the men I brought down, for all the diplomats who begged me behind closed doors to turn the other way, I had one weakness. Her name was Mary. The first time I saw her speak at the State Energy Summit, I thought nothing of her. Another expert with credentials and charts. Pretty enough, yes, sharp cheekbones, focused gaze, and a voice like fine wire, thin, quiet, but deadly precise. She stood at that podium, surrounded by men twice her age, and didn't flinch. Not even when the oil magnates chuckled during her projection of grid conversion costs. I watched her. Not just her body, but how she moved her hands. How she blinked slower when asked something political. How her fingers gripped her pointer like a weapon, not a tool. I had known many women. Some tried to impress me with beauty, others with fear. Mire didn't try at all. And that made me curious. Later that night, at the reception, I approached her. Not as a seducer, but as a reader of character. I told her she had a gift. That she made electrons sound poetic. She laughed, unprepared for a compliment that wasn't about her appearance. That was when I knew she was different. I didn't fall in love with Mire immediately. I don't think I've ever believed in that word the way poets do. But I became interested. Addicted, even. I began to message her under the veil of professional questions. She responded like an engineer, directly, carefully, without emotion. Until she didn't. Our conversations deepened. I asked her about her frustration at work. She told me about the contracts she was forced to approve, the bribes disguised as consultation fees, the offshore accounts she could smell behind every audit trail. She didn't know, at the time, that I was already investigating some of those same threats. And so we began to speak more often, her the analyst, me the investigator. At some point, we stopped pretending it was about work. Let me tell you something about power. The higher you climb, the more isolated you become. The air at the top is thin. Your enemies are invisible. Your friends are actors. And your wife, if you still have one, becomes a reflection of diplomacy, not of intimacy. My marriage was, on paper, perfect. My wife was dignified, multilingual, and utterly lifeless to me. She had long since accepted that she was a figure, not a partner. We lived in separate wings of the estate. We hadn't touched each other in almost 6 years. There was no hatred. Just frost. She knew about the other women. Some she ignored. Others she used to gain leverage at embassy luncheons. But Mary was different. She was not a mistress. She was not a fling. She understood me. She understood what it was to be brilliant and trapped. What it was to be powerful and alone. What it was to wake up every morning and put on armor just to walk through a world that doubted you. I told her I didn't believe in monogamy. That wasn't a line, I meant it. I have seen too many men drown in the lie of romantic purity. I offered her honesty, not illusion. When I told her I wanted her to be my second wife, I meant it in the way our ancestors did, not as a secret, but as a contract of will. My people, the Fang, recognize the strength of polygynous structure not for lust, but for legacy. I needed a wife who would not just warm my bed, but guard my secrets, run my networks, think beyond the constraints of flowers and perfume. Mireille was that woman. I told her she would be cared for, protected, even elevated. I meant every word. But what I did not tell her was that I was being watched. There were files. They started as whispers. Reports from Bata. Audits from foreign-backed companies. A minister whose cousin was arrested in Spain. Slowly, they reached me. At first, I ignored them. Then I tried to cover them for her sake. When I realized she had signed off on one of the flag subcontracts, my blood went cold. It wasn't her fault. She had been pressured by executives, cornered by greed and incompetence. But I knew how the system worked. I had built it. And now, it was turning toward her. I tried to shield her. I pulled strings to delay the investigation. I deleted logs. I intercepted an internal memo from the Ministry of Energy that suggested someone wanted her made into a scapegoat, perhaps to distract from the deeper corruption involving a vice minister's son. They were circling her like vultures. I realized, then, that I had to choose. If I stood with her, I would fall with her. If I left her, she might survive. So I did what only a man in my position could do. I disappeared. It wasn't as cinematic as people imagine. There was no helicopter. No gunfight. Just a phone call to a contact in the Treasury Department, followed by a quiet drive to a private runway. I flew out of Malabo before dawn, using a diplomatic passport issued in Lisbon 5 years earlier for an entirely different identity. My wife was told I had been transferred to a special mission abroad. Mireille was told nothing. Not because I did not love her, but because telling her would have destroyed her even faster. If she had known I was running, she would have been implicated. If she had tried to follow me, they would have charged her with conspiracy. So I left her with silence. The same silence I had spent years breaking through. Now I live in Madrid, under a name that is not mine, watching from a distance as my country continues to spin on its axis of oil and secrets. I have money, safety, but no home. Sometimes I see her in my dreams standing barefoot in that apartment on Avenida de Lopez, staring out the window, her hair uncombed, her body wrapped in a white cotton robe. I wonder if she hates me. If she would kill me if she saw me. And I wouldn't blame her. But I also wonder if she remembers the nights we planned a future not built on fear, but on strategy. Not on fantasy, but on a shared thirst for power, the kind of power that builds, not just burns. She thought I betrayed her. But what she never understood was that I saved her. By vanishing, I severed the link that would have destroyed her. I absorbed the investigation. I became the villain. Because that is what men like me do. We don't get to be heroes. We only get to choose who we lose. And I chose to lose her. So she could survive.